Welcome back to the show. Arizona Republicans have appealed a judge's ruling on birth certificates and trans people. And we'll talk about all of this. But first, to be a doll, hit the like button. So this article's from Arizona Capital Times. I'm going to read this real quick and get into it. So stick around. It says GOP leaders appeal judge's ruling on trans birth certificates. Republican legislative leaders are making a last-ditch effort to defend and preserve a state law that says only those who undergo a sex change operation or surgery are entitled to an amended birth certificate. They say there are legitimate reasons for limiting who can get an altered birth certificate, including preventing fraud and preserving the stability of the vital record system. So that's Republicans' argument against this. And now they're asking the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to overturn the 2024 ruling. So in 2024, the U.S. District Court Judge James Soto from Arizona ruled that Arizona cannot require trans individuals to undergo a gender-affirming surgery in order to amend the gender marker on their birth certificate. So he ruled that they could also have a note from a doctor is fine instead of getting a major surgery. And that was finalized in early 2025. So Judge Soto last week rejected a request by Republicans to stay enforcement of his ruling while they appeal this. And that means his decision becomes official, and trans people who have not undergone sex change surgery can get an amended Arizona birth certificate starting April 30th, unless the appellate court intervenes. So Judge Soto said their outward physical appearance will not fit with the gender marker on their birth certificate. Thus, if these documents are presented to others, they would, of course, be forced to involuntarily out themselves as transgender. And that's when the situation can get dangerous and violent for a trans person. Soto ruled the health department can accept and would have to recognize statements by doctors that an individual is undergoing transition, whether or not that person chooses to go through or wants any surgery. He said for non-trans individuals, the vast majority of whom have an accurate birth certificate are not presented with the unlawful choice of being stripped of their bodily autonomy or face discrimination, harassment, and potential violence. He said there are studies to support the contention of trans challengers that those who have to present birth certificates that do not match their identity, such as in school registration, are subject to being harassed, discriminated against, or assaulted. And he's right. So the Movement Advancement Project and the 2022 trans survey results confirmed what most trans people already knew, that incorrect identification exposes people to a range of negative outcomes, from denial of employment, housing, and public benefits to harassment and physical violence. Also, studies from PubMed Central and Science Direct found that trans people have very low rates of updated documents. So it says, despite the benefits, only a small percentage, about 16 to 19% of trans individuals in these studies had managed to update both their birth certificates and passports to match their gender. So it's not very common for a trans person to have all of this stuff updated. Another study done by the University of Michigan Law and Columbia Law, separate studies, showed that experts are increasingly rejecting the requirement of gender-affirming surgery for legal gender recognition. So this requirement goes all the way back to 1977, because many states then adopted the relevant provisions of the 1977 revision of the Model State Vital Statistics Act. So specifically, that 1977 act recommended that corrections to gender markers on birth certificates be granted after applicants change their sex by surgical procedure and provide a court order to that effect. And this was forward thinking at the time, but we now know that a trans identity does not have to include a genital surgery in order to be a complete life transition. And statistically, only about 10% of trans people ever receive genital surgery, so it's fairly uncommon, contrary to what Republicans believe, which is that everyone and everything is mutilating themselves and is transgender for everybody. It's just completely false. So if you need any help with name changes, check out transequality.org, because while I was researching this stuff, I came across that website, and they have really good guides for name changing processes. So if you're about to go through all the name change stuff, these have, outlined guides for you to follow. And so my own experience with name change stuff, you just have to be patient. And it's very one step at a time, and you have to do things in a certain order. So overall, I've had almost all of my documents changed now, but it took me a few years to get all of that stuff in line. So it's very time consuming. Every step, might cost money. So it's work and time. And if you need help, transequality.org has good guidelines. So thank you guys for listening. Please like this, share this, leave your comments. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated. I will be back soon. Bye.